Hello and welcome to our final presentation of a series of 3 mini lessons on Welcome to Core French. I'm here joined with Elisa Esposito, our FSL instructional coach at the elementary level, and my name is Jessica McGregor, and I'm the FSL coach at the secondary level. We want to keep in mind our approach and our thinking about our students. All students share the characteristics listed on this slide. In particular, when we think about Core French, all students can be successful and they possess language learning potential. Also, we wanted to highlight the fact that FSL teachers are among one of the best trained educators to meet the needs of our additional language students because they have a deep understanding of additional language learning. FSL educators are literacy specialists. For session 3, we hope to accomplish the following learning goals: develop a shared understanding of assessment, explore a lesson template to plan more efficiently, discover instructional routines that support language proficiency, and explore a few vetted FSL resources and tools. You will also know the learning goals we covered in the first 2 sessions, along with the recordings and the slides.
Assessment is a shared responsibility between students and teachers. Assessment includes defining our learning goals and success criteria before we start teaching and making them visible to students throughout a learning cycle. It is important to revisit these throughout the learning cycle to remind students of their why and to track their progress. We make adjustments to these learning goals and success criteria as we collect data and reflect on progress. Ongoing feedback is critical to communicate to students and families how they are doing, celebrate their successes, point out their areas of need, and suggest ways to improve. Feedback can take many forms, such as shared digital checklists, learning portfolio, and verbal check-ins. Many studies have shown that when students take ownership of their learning, being involved in the assessment process, students are more motivated, engaged, and they develop a more positive view towards French. Lastly, and especially in the context of French, students need many opportunities to practice, practice, practice. If we truly view assessment and evaluation as the purpose of improving student learning, then we need to provide many opportunities for students to practice the skills and concepts they are learning and select the most optimal time for students to demonstrate their learning for summative purposes. So let's think about where assessment lies within an action-oriented classroom. In session 2, we touched on some of the components of an action-oriented approach to language learning. If we were to peek our head into this type of classroom, students would be engaged in meaningful interactions in whole class, small groups, or in pairs. To be able to assess and evaluate in this approach, we need to provide communicative activities. Therefore, the best method in collecting evidence of learning would be through observations and conversations. The triangulation of evidence, as mentioned in our ministry's Growing Success document, shows the types of evidence we use to assess and evaluate student learning. The examples of strategies shown under conversations and observations is where we find most of our action-oriented strategies and activities. In previous language approaches, evidence of learning focused heavily on production, such as rehearsed presentations, written tasks, quizzes, and tests. Products have been heavily emphasized in education in the past. However, product is the one that takes the most time for students to complete and for teachers to mark. Products can also lead us to focus mostly on the outcome, rather than considering a student's growth over time. Most conversations and observations are done on the spot and demand less time outside of class time to collect the evidence. This also allows us to provide immediate feedback to students. When we are collecting our evidence of learning through observations and conversations, we make time to actually collect more data over time, which allows students and teachers to track and see growth. There are 2 ideas that seem to concern educators when they consider using more conversation and observations as assessment: how to manage the data and knowing what we are assessing.
There are a number of methods available to allow educators to collect and track student conversations and observations. Whether you prefer using paper and pen or digitally, taking time to try different methods to see which one is most manageable and meaningful to you is key. We have provided a link to a number of templates that you can explore and try, along with the BNLT links to some digital tools. You can explore the option of having a single tracking sheet for each student or a class sheet. Having a single sheet for each student allows you to see the individual growth over time and readily share the information with families and students. Having a whole sheet on one page allows you to see trends in student progress and easily identify next steps for whole class or small group instruction. Another important component is defining your language goals or your learning goals and success criteria before you begin to teach and assess. In order for assessment to be fair and transparent, it is important to share this information with students on a regular basis. Students need to know what, how, and when you are assessing. Giving opportunities for students to self-assess and discuss their results with you will support their learning and ensure that they understand their areas of need. Students need modeled to them what each success criteria looks and/or sounds like in order for them to have the best chance at success. The document shown here walks educators through a method of how to create learning goals from a curriculum expectation and uses a method of formulating questions to help define the success criteria for a particular learning goal. This step in the process can be co-created with students. This ensures that your look-fors are clear to everyone involved. Once we have clearly defined success criteria, we know what we are looking for when we are assessing through observations and conversations. We can only assess what we have taught. In our scope and sequence in the support resource pages, we've included student learning goals written in student-friendly language in both French and English. There are also CFR statements written in the structure of Je peux, as well as suggested subtasks for students to accomplish to help them be successful in the final action-oriented task. These are all items that help define your assessment. They become the what you are looking for when you engage students in conversations and observing their engagement. A lesson template such as the one suggested on this slide ensures that we are including all of the necessary components of a successful learning block. Training our students to follow a certain flow to their learning block can assist many students who may already feel uneasy about being in French class. Predictability makes students feel safe, and it may help in their understanding of what's going on in a fully immersive French classroom. It may also help increase student engagement. To have students reach these desirable outcomes, it takes time, consistency, and plenty of practice. Whatever template that you land on, there needs to be communication of the purpose, the learning goal and success criteria, explicit instruction, plenty of time for hands-on and practice, and finishing with the consolidation and metacognition. Most of our time is spent in the middle green section, acquérir, where students are engaging with the language in pairs or in groups. Practice, practice, practice is so key in additional language learning.
When we think of how we should be planning our learning block, it is beneficial to know their level of proficiency in the language. These charts give you a guideline of the amount of instructional time focused for each competency. As you can see, when we are beginning users of the language, A1, A2, the bulk of our instruction and student engagement are spent in listening and speaking. We need to provide students the bulk of our time to hear and speak the language. This will create the foundations to prepare them for more reading and writing in the later levels. How will seeing this slide impact the kind of activities you plan for your students? We all have students at varying levels of proficiency in the language. Not any two students learn or demonstrate their learning in the same way. As we get to know our learners and adopt a universal design for learning, UDL, for planning and assessment, we create multiple entry points for our students to participate and engage in the language with their peers. All students can benefit from working and learning from each other. This slide provides examples of entry points students could use to participate in the task of describing themselves and their family. Keep in mind, these are not big ideas. Rather, they are sample subtasks that you can bring your students to do to support their overall learning goal. Routines take time, consistency, patience, adjusting, practice, and repeat. Like we mentioned in our slide about deciding on a flow of your daily learning blocks, instilling a few routines that students and teachers feel confident in using on a daily or weekly basis will make space for teachers and students to focus on language growth. Routines are predictable and they allow students to feel safe in their environment. As students build confidence in being in French class, many behaviors that we see or hear associated with core French may turn to more productive behavior. The next few slides will take you through a few instructional routines that you can bring into your classroom. The gradual release model is an instructional approach that allows teachers to teach routines, strategies, language structures, or content explicitly. This provides students with varied degrees of teacher support as they build new knowledge and skills. The key instructional approaches of modeled, shared, guided, and independent practice can be used separately and in combination. As students progress through the varying levels of support, the teacher gradually withdraws support and students assume more responsibility. This model provides students multiple opportunities to practice their new learning and apply it to new situations. Research indicates that scaffolding is helpful in all new learning situations. Before scaffolding can begin, teachers need to assess their students' background knowledge, language level, and develop a comfortable working rapport with the class.
The action-oriented approach to language learning focuses on completing a task or solving a problem. This leads us to the idea that in order to learn the language in this way is to concentrate on the student's needs to communicate their message in order to engage with others spontaneously. The neurolinguistic approach to language learning is rooted in the natural order of language learning. As toddlers, we learned our first language by speaking, listening, and modeling others. Therefore, it is only natural to acquire an additional language by doing the same. Rather than teaching vocabulary in the beginning in isolation, the neurolinguistic approach teaches conversation. It is through these conversations that vocabulary and grammar are being internalized. Each of our resource pages in our scope and sequence provides a section for possible sentence structures to focus on with students with the action-oriented task provided. Note that all sentence structures are presented with the question associated with the sentence starter, and the rest of the sentence is left blank for students to add their responses. For example, if we want students to learn how to give an opinion, we may teach them the sentence structure je pense que, along with the question qu'est-ce que tu penses? This section of our resource pages also provides a link to the recorded demonstration of how to do the steps with the students. This routine will take lots of practice, not only for the students, but for the teacher as well. We recommend having the steps written out for yourself for the first few times you try this with your students to help scaffold your learning as well. Turn and Talk is an oral language support strategy that provides students scaffolded interactions to formulate ideas and share their thinking with another student. Turn and Talk is used to help students to more safely construct their thinking out loud. When Turn and Talk is used, all students have a chance to share their thinking in a low-risk setting. Verbalizing their thinking scaffolds students' understanding and provides talk at a peer level. Simply defined, Turn and Talk is a teacher-offered opportunity for students to turn to another student and talk something through for a very brief period of time before whole group instruction resumes. To effectively embed a tourne à ton partenaire et discute as a frequent and useful talk move, many teachers would need to rethink their instructional pace. Presently, many of us are clock-driven. Turn and Talk requires a shift from pacing based on time constraints and mechanistic formats to pacing on cognitive demand and evidence of student learning. It keeps student meaning-making at the center of the lesson and slows down the rapid-fire explanations and questions by teachers. Teachers and students who invest in making time for brief moments of Turn and Talk often gain back the time in multiple ways.
Inside-outside circle is a cooperative learning strategy. Students form two concentric circles and take turns on rotation to face new partners to answer or discuss the teacher's questions. During this strategy, students from two different circles, half of the group stands in a circle facing outward, while the other half forms a circle around them facing inward. Students exchange information until the teacher signals the outer circle to move in one direction. Students now have a different partner with whom to exchange. It is true what they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and more. Images are a great way to spark discussion, build vocabulary, reinforce sentence structures, as seen at the top of this slide, and develop critical thinking. The sentence structures provided scaffold the thinking beautifully. Ce que je vois allows students to build the necessary vocabulary to not only describe what they see, but to also front-load the words needed for the next prompt. Ce que je pense. This sentence structure encourages students to develop inferencing by drawing conclusions about the image based on evidence they may have pulled from the first prompt. Je pense qu'il va pleuvoir parce que la personne porte un parapluie et un imperméable. Finally, students formulate questions that can be used to continue the class discussion. Je me demande pourquoi la personne est seule. With the action-oriented approach, we are placing students in authentic context in which the communication is taking place. The resources we select needs to reflect this approach as well. Priority is given to authentic materials. Supports are purposefully selected from real-life sources, such as newspaper articles, radio programs, advertising, excerpts from books, video clips, and so forth. Above all, to reflect the meaning and tasks being covered. The concept of text is vast. It includes oral texts and written texts, such as business cards, bus tickets, newspaper articles, book excerpts, and wikis, to name just a few. At the bottom of each resource page in our scope and sequence, a number of resources have been pulled from our district's vetted apps list to help support the suggested authentic task. The resources with a bullseye indicates that targeted selection of authentic material. As you come across authentic materials in French, bookmark them and collect these materials as they will become your main source of resources to support your programming.
The performance of all students is strengthened when the diversity of the class is recognized and valued. Acknowledging students' different backgrounds and experiences is best accomplished by weaving appropriate examples throughout lessons. Culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, CRRP, is not about cultural celebrations, nor is it aligned with traditional ideas around multiculturalism. It involves careful acknowledgement, respect, and an understanding of difference and its complexities. What does a classroom look like, sound like, and feel like when it is inclusive, when instruction is responsive to the full range of student diversity? The selection of material presented to students is a way to ensure students feel safe, welcomed, and valued as a member of the classroom community. The action-oriented approach lends itself very well to incorporating CRRP, as we see the curriculum as flexible and adaptive to the lived experiences of students, so that they see themselves and their lives reflected in daily learning opportunities. By knowing and building upon students' prior knowledge, interests, strengths, and learning styles, and ensuring they are foundational to the learning experiences in the classroom and the school, we are creating a culturally responsive and relevant learning environment for our students. For instance, if our action-oriented task is to have students decide on the classroom playlist for work periods, we are inviting students to share music from their lived experiences and discussing different elements of the song in French. We are also sharing French music from different parts of the world to expose students to different sociolinguistic conventions and make connections to their lives. We also wanted to mention the list of vetted apps provided by our district. To finish again with some testimonials from core French teachers. Here, they share the difference they have observed in their students when they use clear and consistent assessment practices and regularly use the gradual release of responsibility model. These and other comments can be found in the Guide to Reflective Practice for Core French Teachers document series on transforming FSL. FSL literacy coaches are here to support you. There are a number of ways that we can stay in touch. Please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.